Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to talk about something here that is it's a little interesting. We actually had a debate about this, sort of, at least something in relation to this on the podcast that will be coming out. I guess that episode will be out in not this Monday, but the Monday afterwards. So I think that's September 11th. But I also saw an article here that discussed some of this stuff. And then I saw another article that kind of hinted at a review, I feel like, for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, which, by the way, the early reviews for the show will be out in 2 days, apparently. On September 5th is when the embargo lifts. So I'll have a video out then breaking down all the reviews and stuff like that. And I'm really going to try to go through all of them. And like usually how I do look at the early reviews is I try to pick like the articles that I know generally, you know, write about The Walking Dead quite a bit. And, you know, I want to see some newer perspectives, but I like to focus on the ones that talk about The Walking Dead quite a bit, the ones that have criticisms all the time and like how do they view it now. And then, you know what I mean? Like I try to get a lot of different perspectives in that. So yeah, we'll break down all the early reviews and all of that on Tuesday, I believe, and we'll see what people are saying about this show, because they're not just talking about the premiere, they're talking about all 6 episodes, right? So yeah, it's definitely going to be a really interesting day, because I know for Dead City, there was just so much praise for it. And then we watched the show and yeah, we could see why there was a lot of praise, right? So for this show, we'll just have to wait and see. But what I wanted to talk about here was, you know, is Daryl Dixon a good replacement for Rick Grimes? Or I guess, could he replace Rick Grimes, I guess, is more of the question. And there's been some debate about this over the years, obviously. After Rick left the show, there was sort of that question, I guess, a lot of fans had, which was, could Daryl replace Rick Grimes? And it's been, you know, I think in terms of the writing and I think in terms of what the show was, it was very difficult to do something like that. You couldn't really necessarily just have one character jump in that spot. But I think with where the spinoffs are now, things are a little bit different. And again, I do think it really, like, I think the spinoff here could change some of that, and I'm going to talk about that here. So before we go any further, obviously make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. The article here that I saw this from was screenrant.com, so I will leave a link down below the article. You can go check everything out there. I'm not going to necessarily reference anything said in the article here, but I'm just going to be giving my thoughts on sort of the topic here, which is, you know, the headline says The Walking Dead's next spinoff will finally answer whether the franchise replaced Rick Grimes. And I think that is something that obviously for a lot of fans, the obvious answer is going to be no. Like, you can't replace Rick Grimes. You just can't replace him. And, you know, to a certain extent, I do also feel that as well. There is no way you can really replace that character, because there is something about Rick Grimes that when he's on screen, you know, his story, just the history there's just a certain excitement that you get. And there's just, I don't know, maybe it's Andrew Lincoln. I don't know what it is necessarily, but Rick Grimes is just such an amazing character. And it's very hard to replace that story, that character, and just his on-screen presence. Like, it is something that is very, very hard to replace. But I'm also questioning that a little bit here, just based off of some of the stuff that I read in another article, which I believe was from Polygon. And I'll leave a link down below to the article. But the article here, or at least the link, says Daryl Dixon is a return to The Walking Dead's glory years. And I see something like that, and I'm like, wait, is this an earlier review? It's kind of hard to say, but in the article, they just sort of talk about the fact that Nicotero wanted to focus on some of the glory years of The Walking Dead and just focus on what made the show so good in those first few seasons. And at the end of the article, there is a reference here. Like, the quote says, "When told that it's one of my favorite installments in the entire franchise, Nicotero quickly responded, 'Mine too, by the way.'" And so I'm actually just kind of wondering if this article was overall written, again, this is more just speculation from me, but I wonder if this article was almost written in a way where it's really praising the show, because it does actually feel like something like the best of The Walking Dead sort of thing, right? And I actually do wonder, again, and I saw this article here from Screen Rant, like, could they actually do something like that where Daryl could actually be that exciting of a character, where he could almost replace Rick Grimes? Because there's certain characters that I think if they were still around, they could almost replace him. For example, I believe Shane, if he was still around to this day, I think he could replace Rick Grimes as like the lead of the franchise. I really do. Like, there are certain characters that I think could be around. Like, I honestly, I would have said Morgan, but Morgan, I think he's just sort of been tainted because of Fear the Walking Dead. Like, I think he could lead a show, and I think if the writing was really great, it would just be phenomenal because we've seen episodes like that. But I just think that character right now, he needs to be separated from Fear the Walking Dead. And I mean, now, he's off the show, so that's a good thing, but we'll have to see him with other characters, and then they'll have to sort of change some stuff up there and just like rebuild that character again. Because again, Lenny James is amazing. I love Morgan as a character, but it's just, him being on Fear the Walking Dead, it really hurt that character, right? And I think there is a good argument for Daryl, in this spinoff anyways, to potentially being an actual really good replacement for Rick Grimes, but a character that people would actually be excited about watching and could actually like legitimately like take over the franchise. Because the thing is like, it's hard right now with all the spinoffs and all that, right? Because everyone is watching, and like Dead City, I love Dead City. I love those characters, obviously. And Daryl Dixon, we haven't watched it yet, but a lot of this, we're watching because of some connection to Rick Grimes, right? Like that's sort of a big reason why a lot of people are watching, is because of the connections to Rick Grimes, and we want to see a lot of that. But I actually wonder if in the Daryl Dixon spinoff, if they focus on going back to the roots of the show, and Daryl becomes like a really great lead for that show and a character that people really want to watch for, I wonder if they could almost just build something new there, and then Daryl becomes the face of the franchise. Like, I really do wonder about that, because, and again, like I think, like, honestly, if you're asking me just plain and simple, could Daryl replace Rick Grimes? My obvious answer is no. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here a little bit, but I think out of all of the characters, Daryl is most likely the one to be able to do that, and it has to be him specifically. It couldn't be Negan. I know Jeffrey Dean Morgan is very popular, and that character Negan is loved by a lot of people, but there's just a very complex backstory there, I feel like, and there's just too much there where I think if people start to follow him as the face of the franchise, it just changes a lot because of the origins of The Walking Dead, right? It's almost like switching sides. Like, now you're on the evil side kind of thing, right? Even though he's not necessarily evil, I think that's how people would view it overall, right? Like, that's why I think Daryl is kind of the perfect person to replace Rick in that sense. And it just really depends on a lot of things. Like, to me, I think there's a way you could do it. And I will also say, I don't think Daryl has been really given the chance to do that yet. Like, yes, Rick left the show however many years ago, but Daryl, he never really necessarily became the leader. Like, he did some stuff that Rick used to do, but everyone else did as well. Like Michonne, Carol, and Maggie, they took some of that as well. It was sort of, the role that Rick had on that show was split apart among all those characters. And so Daryl didn't really get a chance to just sort of be on his own and just like lead a show and really explore the character, because there was so much there. And Daryl was still a part of Rick's story because he was on The Walking Dead, right? And I think it's just one of those things. And I think in the final season, you saw a little bit more from Daryl, but again, there was still this connection to the Grimes story and all of that. And I think this spinoff could answer a lot of that, honestly. I think the spinoff, since there's not a lot of connections there, I think it could really give us, I think, a definite answer on that. I really do believe that. And that's why when I saw this article here, I was like, you know what, that's actually a really good point. Like, I do think this spinoff could say a lot about that, because I don't think Daryl has been given a fair shot to try and lead the franchise yet, because again, he was on a show that Rick led. Like, I think he needed to start his own show and just start something different and create something from the ground up, right? So I think this first season here could potentially say a lot here. And again, like there's a lot of things that are at play here. Like, the thing about the Rick and Michonne show is, even though Rick will be back and it'll be really exciting to see him again, it might only be one season, but even if it gets a season 2 or a season 3, I don't think those 3 seasons are going to be coming out like every single year for the next 3 years kind of thing. Like, I think it's going to be one of those things where season 1 comes out 2024, season 2 comes out in 2026. Like, I think it's a limited series in the sense that there's just going to be these smaller chapters, and each season will be 6 episodes sort of thing, right? It's probably going to be very small, like 2 or 3 seasons. And so there's not going to be a lot of Rick Grimes. Like, he will be around, and there's definitely going to be that aspect to it. But I think there's going to be a lot of focus as well on Daryl. And again, that's kind of the cool thing about this show is it is focusing on a single character. And, you know, Dead City focused on Maggie and Negan. And so obviously you had to sort of split the, I guess, focus a little bit there, right? But on Daryl Dixon, you don't have to. It's just all about Daryl. And even if Carol shows up, like I know Carol is showing up in season 2, it's still going to be more Daryl's show because the show is also named The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, right? So I think in that sense, Daryl has a really, really amazing chance here in becoming sort of the leader here of the franchise. And it's really insane to say, I know. We actually talked about this on the podcast that we recorded yesterday, and that's why I'm sort of wanting to get into this here a little bit. It's because we were talking about the fact that, or me and Budge, anyways, we were talking about the fact that, well, at least my argument was that Andrew Lincoln is more popular than Norman Reedus and Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and well, I guess Jeffrey Dean Morgan sort of got brought up into that. And he was arguing, no, I think they are more popular or they're bigger actors or something. And I guess it's because they were in other stuff and Andrew Lincoln hasn't really necessarily been in anything. And my argument was more that, you know, I don't know why he hasn't really been a lot because he's an amazing actor. But I think if he was and other stuff, he would be much bigger than them in terms of, you know, people knowing them. And yeah, it's an interesting debate. We didn't really necessarily agree with each other or whatever. We just sort of agreed to disagree. But there is that argument there overall, right? Like Norman Reedus, is he much more of a household name for a lot of people than Andrew Lincoln? And like he has been in more stuff. He's done Death Stranding. There's just a lot of other little projects that he's done that a lot of people know him from. And Andrew Lincoln hasn't really done a lot. And I don't really know the reason why. Is he not getting the roles or is it because he's being really picky about what he's in, right? Like it's so hard to say because he's such a great actor. And it's kind of insane to me to think that he's just not really in anything. Like, it's honestly crazy because you see Denai Guerrera and she's like in Marvel and stuff like that, doing so amazing. Like, they're all doing so amazing. But Andrew Lincoln, the one who led The Walking Dead, who plays Rick Grimes, he's not even in a Marvel thing at all. Like, I don't know if he's just holding out because if he's going to be in Marvel, he wants to do something very, very specific. He wants a bigger character kind of thing. It's honestly, it's so hard to say. Like, I know the argument that Budge was actually making was that, you know, Norman Reedus and Jeffrey Dean Morgan, they're more like big actors and they're stars sort of thing. And Andrew Lincoln is more of like a TV star, right? And I don't know, like, I get it. You know, if you look at it, I kind of get it because he's known for a TV role. But Rick Grimes as a character is such an iconic character just in general in pop culture. And that's why, to me, it's a little different. Like, it extends more than that. He's not just like a TV character, right? It's sort of like Walter White. Yes, he's a TV character, but he's also, like, he's much more bigger than that. You know what I mean? So anyways, the argument here, really, the point of this video is, could Daryl Dixon potentially replace Rick Grimes? I think it's very complex. I think it's something that we'll have to wait and see. I don't think he could ever replace Rick Grimes in the sense of like people just prefer him over the character. I mean, I think some people could, but I think it could just be one of those things where we're just going to have to wait and see, right? We'll have to wait and see how this spinoff does and just could we follow that character? And obviously I love both characters so much. They're my two favorite characters. And it's weird to think of like one character replacing the other one. But in terms of the franchise, you know, succeeding and stuff like that, like you don't want people always just wanting to follow Rick Grimes forever. And then he's off the show and the character story's over. And then now it's like, oh, who do we follow? And there's not a lot of excitement behind Daryl. But if that's the general feeling, I mean, you can't really escape that, right? So it's one of those things where we just kind of have to see, could Daryl do that? And I don't think he's been given a fair shot yet. I really don't. I just think that on The Walking Dead, there was just really no chance to. And now with this spinoff, we could actually see that. I think we're gonna see in these first 6 episodes, could he actually lead a show? Is his story and just who he is as a character exciting enough for people to be so hyped about and stuff, right? We'll have to wait and see, because again, Daryl is a really amazing character. Like, he's been around, he's always there, but you got to think of it in terms of, imagine if Daryl went off the show in season 9 and Rick was there the entire time. Imagine if we were hearing about Daryl's return and this was a new spinoff on Daryl. People would be so excited because it's the return of Daryl Dixon and we haven't seen him in like 5 years or something, right? Like, people would be so hyped for that. So we'll have to wait and see, but definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video and I'll see you guys in the next one.